In this video, we're going to take a look at a really cool feature of the SQL called a decode statement. And a decode statement is a way of replacing information in your query and displaying a different value on the screen. This is real good for real small type of almost kind of lookup information. The biggest challenge with the decode statement is that everything is kind of hard-coded inside the decode statement, so if you have a lot of different values and you want to do a lot of different kind of transformations on your data, you should probably create a lookup table. But if you have just a couple of values and you don't want to go through the hassle of setting up a lookup table and then populating the lookup table and then writing your query to reflect all of that information, a decode statement is a real nice, easy way of being able to transform the data that you return to your end users. So the basic format of the decode statement is it takes a couple of different parameters. It takes a column name that you're going to actually perform the decode on, a value that's coming out of the database, a replacement value that you're going to display, and then this repeats over and over again for however many different values you have. Let me stick a comma in there, stick a comma in there, and you can have, you know, many of these as you want. And then finally, at the very end, you'll have a default value if it's not satisfied by anything else. This looks a little confusing, and if you look at decode statements inside typical code, whether they're report code or PL SQL code, they can look a little overwhelming. But as soon as we go through an example, it should be pretty easy. So I'm going to hop over into SQL Developer like I usually do, and I'm looking at my employees table here, and you can see that I have all these different employees, and all the way at the end of my employees table I have this department ID, and you can see I have the different values: 30, 60, 90, 100. If I write a report, I'm probably going to have some kind of lookup table that goes out to some departments, and there's a departments thing here that I can join on and get the actual department name on. But if I just want to do quick down and dirty values, and I don't want to go through the hassle of doing all of those different joins and making my code more complex, I can use a decode statement to go in here and just change the values around so that when it gets displayed back to the end user, they see something different. So if I just do, let's say, last name and department ID, if I just query those things, let's go through and say last name, department ID from HR employees. Execute that guy. I'll get everything back: King 90, Dahan 90, Hunhold 60, Austin 60. This may not make any sense to whoever's running this query if this is coming out of a report or something like that. So then I can use the decode statement to make this a little more readable and make it a lot easier for me to figure out what this data means. Again, you don't want to have too many different values. If I have an employees table that has hundreds and hundreds of rows and I have departments all over the place, it'll be tough to maintain your decode statement, and every time you add a new department you'll have to go in and redo your decode statement. So it's not something that you'd want to use on something that's changing or has a lot of distinct values. For something that has a small amount of distinct values that don't change very much, a decode is a great way of making things a lot easier for you. So instead of just querying the department ID, I'm going to put in the decode statement here, and then the column that I'm interested in. So in this case it's going to be department ID. And then I'm going to have these pairs of values that say when this value is queried out of the database, I really want to replace it with this value and display it on the screen. So anytime I get a department ID of 90, I want to say something like Phoenix. When I get a department value of 60, I want to say something like Denver. When I get a department value of, let's say, 100, I want to return what? St. Louis. And for everything else, I'm going to return Albuquerque. Did I spell that right? Albuquerque. So there's no pair at the end there. So Oracle is smart enough to know that what we're querying here doesn't have a value associated with it. So this is basically like a catch-all. So if it doesn't show up at 90, 60, or 100, I'm just going to return Albuquerque. Execute that statement. You can see it's replaced all of the different values. Phoenix, 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 Denver, St. Louis. Anything else that doesn't fit into that decode statement, it returns Albuquerque. And you can see I have a lot of Albuquerques here because I obviously have a lot of employees that didn't fit into 90, 60, or what was the third value here? 100. So again, this is a real quick and easy way of kind of changing the values around. One of the things that you might use a decode statement for that's pretty common is like a gender field. If you want to type out male or female, it's real common to just store an M or F inside the database. You can do a decode statement that says anytime you see an M, replace it with the word male. Anytime you see an F, replace it with the word female. It's a real nice way of making the data that comes back out of your database a lot more readable. Again, if you have a lot of distinct values, probably not a good candidate for using the decode statement because you're going to have a lot of distinct values in the actual select clause of what you're looking for. Also, if the values change on a great deal, if you're adding a lot of departments in this example, and they change all the time, maybe the numbers change, the locations change all the time, again, not a good candidate because you're going to have to go in there and change the manual things that you put in here, the actual literals that you put in inside your select statement. So that's not a good candidate either. But for stuff that doesn't change too often, doesn't have a lot of distinct values, decode statements are a really cool way of displaying information back to your end users in a much more readable manner without having to actually change any of the data inside your database.